We have once again Anita B. Thompson. She's presenting this afternoon about wild harvesting native seed on state and federal lands. And I'm just going to briefly reintroduce Anita in case you happen to have missed her earlier presentation this morning. Anita is an agriculture extension agent for the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Her specialties in extension are sustainable agriculture, agroecology, native plant use in agriculture, non-commercialized seed education, pasture management, and sustainable grazing operations. She has dual BS degrees from the University of Nevada, Reno in forest management and rangeland ecology, and a master's degree from Colorado State University in ecological restoration. And before working for the Cooperative Extension, she has been a farmer, wildland firefighter, forester, reforestation specialist, silviculturist, and ecologist, and she's also an Army veteran. So thank you very much for joining us once again, Anita, for this very important presentation to make sure we all are being the best plant people we can be in Arizona.
Thank you. And it's good to see everyone again. So the reason this presentation came about was an ask from some of our partners at federal and state levels to kind of help everyone understand what some of the ethical guidelines and kind of talk about wild harvesting native seeds on federal and state lands. So we're going to start with some terminology. So a lot of times there's a lot of people that understand population dynamics and population ecology and all of those kind of really complex forms of ecology. But in this case, a lot of times we have some issues kind of communicating what population is. And so in the basic sense, the most basic sense, a population is going to be the total number of individuals of a given biological species found in one place at one time. And where it gets complex when we talk about it in plants is you can have a population of one, you can have a population of 1 million, but you can also have one population of one population. So there's a lot of different terminology and everything, but in the case of this talk, we're going to talk about a population as it refers to the total number of individuals in one set area. And so wild harvesting, so harvesting seed or plant materials from their natural environment, and by natural, that means non-cultivated. So if it was cultivated at any point in time, it would not necessarily fall under wild harvesting. Federal public lands are lands that are administered by a federal land management agency. And the difference is there's a lot of federal agencies. A land management agency has what's called an organic act, which basically tells how they can manage the land and what they can do. And these organic acts are very old. So U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and National Park Service are the three that most people are familiar with. Other agencies such as Farm Service Agency, Natural Resource Conservation Service, they're not land management agencies. They don't manage lands. So we're just talking about land management agencies. And then state lands, they're administered by the state of Arizona, and these include state trust lands, state parks, and then they also have some oversight on Arizona private lands for natural resources. So they do have some oversight when it comes to plants and native plants. And in private land, we're basically saying that it's land and owned and managed with a legal deed or similar by a non-governmental entity. And that's just the tie into the state. There's other classifications, but that's kind of the basic that we're going with today. And then a seed, I'm sure a lot of people know what a seed is. It's the unit of reproduction. When you talk about plant material, we're referring to seeds and seed material, cuttings from plants that can regenerate vegetatively and it's basically a clone, rootings that regenerate from root cuttings, which is also a cloning method, and then live plants removed from their native environment. So forest products are how the USDA Forest Service defines the category that native plants falls into. They also call them natural materials. So if you're on a Forest Service site, if you're on one of the forest websites and you're looking for permit information, you're going to look under natural materials or forest products. And a native plant, there's so many definitions out there. This is one of the ones that has been the easiest for me to explain, especially when I'm working with different user groups. is a plant that lives or grows naturally in a particular region without direct or indirect human intervention. And that's from the U.S. National Arboretum. And then just BLM, U.S. Forest Service, and National Park Service. It's just a lot of people, when you hear BLM, it's Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service. Rarity status is how rare a plant is based on surveys and known populations. So all the rarity statuses that you see are going to be, basically based on how much of a survey was done, what was found in the survey, how accurate the surveys are. I'm just kidding. I was going to keep going on. Okay, so starting from the beginning, you are walking in the desert, foothills, forests, canyons, and you see seeds on the plant or the plant itself that you really want. I mean, this is just like, it's a beautiful plant and you just want that plant. You want it in your backyard. You want it, on your land. You want to propagate it somehow. However, so how much can you harvest? What permits do you need? What permissions do you need? What exactly is ethical harvesting? And then can I dig up and take a live plant? And a hint on that one is no, not usually. So it's called destructive removal or destructive sampling. And it's just not something that the agencies really like. While you're out there looking at these plants, ask yourself, who owns the land that I want to harvest on? Who is the legal owner? What are my goals with this plant and the seed? Do I know how this plant is and how it grows? What does it need to be successful? Will I be selling the seed of this plant? So that's a big question I get a lot. Will I be selling the seed of the plants or plants from a future generation of the plant that you want to harvest? And do I know the rarity status of this plant? So we're going to talk about ethical harvesting. Most people, this is not generally an issue, especially in Native Plant Society, but there are a lot of people that don't understand the ethics behind native plant harvesting. And the biggest reason is that native plants can get easily crowded out by cultivated plants by intent or non-intent. So when we're losing a lot of our native species because of cultivation, we really want to sustain the populations we have, if not grow them. So by harvesting, we're looking at a 5% harvest rule. So do not harvest more than 5% of a population. So again, that goes into what is the population? In this case, we're talking about 5% of a group of plants. And then, so if you go out and you see one plant and you don't see any other plants, that's going to be kind of a signal that you don't want to take from that plant because there's not 5% in that area. You want to spread out your gathering or harvesting to more than one population. That's for genetic reasons and also for making sure of plant longevity. Do not destroy the plant to collect the seed, and only harvest the live plant or plant materials if it's required for research or other needs. So, annuals, their job is to grow, flower, produce seed, die, and return, keep going. Perennials, they have a different life history, pattern. They're going to want to be able to grow out, grow up, they want to add life, whereas annuals just kind of do their thing once per year and then move on. So if you're picking an annual, it's less of an issue than if you are actually destroying a perennial. So when you pick something, you're stopping that life process for that plant. So when you're collecting seed, obviously you're continuing the life process at a later point. But if you're just taking part of the plant for no reason, then obviously that plant is not going to be able to continue to procreate, do its job, create seed, all that stuff. So we really only like to limit it to research or other needs. Obviously, foraging is a whole nother thing. This is just for seed collecting. Do not destroy the surrounding environment to get to the plants. When I was a forester, the biggest thing I saw is people would hop in their souped up Jeeps, tear up the road to get to a certain area, and then they'd be harvesting something and then completely just destroy the area and then hop in, tear it up and go back. It's your choice how you want to arrive and leave an area, but part of ethical harvesting is don't destroy the surrounding environment just to get to the plant, and only take what you need. Leave enough healthy seed behind to further support the plant's growth. If you take all the good seed, so if you have a plant And part of it just looks like the genetics are sketchy and it just doesn't look great. And then you have like a plant over here that just is beautiful genetics. It's just like this gorgeous thing. So if you take all the seed from the beautiful plant, you're going to be leaving the genetics of the more difficult, the plant that's not as healthy. So we're basically going to really look at, just take what you need, take maybe a couple seeds and leave the rest if you have a large population. If not, just leave it. Like, I mean, we all want beautiful plants in our yard, but maybe don't like focus on that particular plant. So we're going to just do a little exercise. So we're going to say 5% rule. So we're not going to harvest from 5% of a population. So, I mean, so a lot of people that know me know I have a brain injury and I have some injuries. So, I have to see everything visually. So I created this visual thing. We have 1 plant, 5 plants, 10 plants. So I made these different populations and I did some math, right? I put out 105 plants and 5% of that is 5.25 plants. So I can harvest from 5 plants. And then I circled my populations. Obviously, you're not going to do this. You can just, when you're walking in the woods, you can kind of just, do this in your brain. So these are my 7 populations that I have. So where would you harvest from, knowing that you have these 7 population and these different number of plants? These are all the same plant. These are just signifying different numbers in that grouping. So for me, I would take where the scissors are. So I would take one from up at the top. I would take one of the, single ones that has kind of a lot of plants in it. I would take a little bit from each one. And why would I do that? So most of the populations are all spread out apart, far enough to have some genetic diversity. And I'm harvesting from the groups that have the most plants. So that's kind of why I chose those areas. You can definitely have a different view on it, but that's why I would choose those areas, that they're spread out enough. I'm not over harvesting. I'm getting different genetics, and then I'm also leaving a lot behind. These are really great references that I like to use. There's one from the San Juan National Forest. It is Guidelines for Ethical and Sustainable Harvesting of Wild Plants. That one's amazing. I really like that one. And then Montana Native Plant Society has Guidelines for Collecting Native Plants. It's a 2-pager, and that one has a lot of really great information also. So we're going to go back to our scenario. We're out walking and in the desert and the forest and all that good stuff, and you see the plants that you really, really, really want. So how much can you harvest? On federal lands, the BLM is a small amount of seed. So how much is a small amount of seed? They're going to tell you personal use. So keeping in mind that you have to talk about germination rates and all kinds of stuff. I've seen, anywhere from like a small Ziploc baggie to a handful. So it's kind of up to you being able to explain to whoever is asking the questions what a small amount means to you. The BLM officers do have guidelines sometimes, but the ones I've talked to, they don't, a lot of them are just like, if you're coming with a bucket of seed and you're calling it personal amount, they're going to ask questions. Forest Service, you got to contact the local forest. And National Park Service, you cannot harvest any seed whatsoever. On state lands, they have 2 categories, highly safeguarded and then salvage restricted. And I'll talk about those in a bit. With the state lands, if it's highly safeguarded, then you cannot at all. If it's not on the safeguarded list, then you can do a small amount. And then if it's on salvage restricted, you cannot. And then if it is not on that list, then you can do a small amount. Private lands, here, this is with the state. Since state oversees most private lands, if it's on the highly safeguarded list or just the highly safeguarded list, then you should not. And then if it's not on the highly safeguarded list, then I would just use ethical guidelines in doing it. If it's on private lands that you don't own, you do need written permission from the landowner. And in other lands, written permission all the whole time. Tribal lands, military lands, and other special designations all have their own rules. So you need to reach out to those landowners. Tribal exemptions on federal lands do apply. So if there is a documented tribal member gathering seed, they are allowed to. They just have to carry their ID. Contact an agency for more information on that because they do have different guidelines. So when you're harvesting live plants, a lot of people want to go out and be like, I just would rather just dig up that plant and take it to my yard. with permission from the landowner. And then you want to go check out the state on this as far as, you know, if it is on the highly safeguarded list. If it's just a friend and you want to like share something, then, you know, that's kind of between you guys. But relocating desert plants is really difficult. They require specific steps, and they get really, really really grouchy if you don't do it the correct way, and then you don't have a good outcome a lot of times. So work with a horticulturist. If you are a horticulturist, reach out to some of the people that are wanting to do this and kind of help bridge that gap. Public lands not allowed, except in one exception is wilding permits, and it is for tree species on Forest Service lands. Permits are required and issued at the district office, not the forest office. So you have to go to the district. These will allow you to remove small young live trees with root systems from Forest Service lands to plant on personal property. And as a commercial operator, you cannot have harvesting permits. So they cannot be sold at any point in time, and their progeny cannot be sold at any point in time. Can I sell the seeds or plants material that I collect? Not without the appropriate permits. The moment you intend to sell a seed to another entity person, you are become a commercial operator. So with federal lands, you require commercial collection permits, and permits have extensive requirements, including additional herbarium work. So in the case of some of our permits that we work with, the Region 3 with the Forest Service requires us to have one sample and have it sent to a herbarium of choice of every plant of every species that we gather. With state laws, in order to sell seed in Arizona, you need a labeler and a retail permit. They both through the state. There's required seed testing, germination, viability, noxious weeds, all kinds of things, and those are all costs to incur. And then the label requirement for seeds must meet federal standards. So there are some additional things to think about if you want to sell it. A lot of people are like, I grew this in my backyard, I'm going to sell it at XYZ. Just think before you do that. BLM, this is their guidelines. It's under Can I Keep This? And there's small amounts of plant parts, seeds, flowers, and berries may be collected for personal use in most areas. So you'll have to kind of go to their website and figure out where you want to be. Arizona Department of Agriculture native plant rules. This is a big one, and this is I had a learning curve on this one. So you have landowner rights. They have the right to remove or destroy plants on their land, but you have to give notification to Arizona. This is all from Saguaro, right? This starts as everyone, when they talk about it, they're thinking the saguaros, right? This is any listed plant that is protected in Arizona, and they have a list. You can go onto their website, which is, it looks like this. This is their, so there's that blue one at the box in the bottom that has like apply, renew, native plants. You click on it, you scroll down, you get to this orange box that says view now, pops open the Arizona Administrative Code, and you scroll almost all the way to the bottom. Then you're going to see Arizona protective, it's Appendix A, protected native plants by category, where we're going to talk about highly safeguarded versus some of the other classifications they have. So Forest Service, here's your offices. These are your supervisor's offices. And remember, you have your forest has a supervisor level office. They are over the districts, and then districts have their own offices, and they have different parameters in the native plant world as far as who you need to talk to. Most of our forests do not have a regional botanist, or I'm sorry, a forest botanist. I believe right now only the Coconino National Forest does. There might be one on the Tonto still. Apache Sitgraves does not, and I don't believe some of the others do. And you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, because I know staffing changes. If they don't have information, then they send you to the regional botanist who is in Albuquerque. There are sensitive protected lists, and these are the links. So there's the BLM, the Forest Service, and then State of Arizona. And these will take you to what is protected right now. When you're picking your plant, or you see your amazing plant that you want to pick, you want to make sure it's not a noxious weed. So one of the reasons noxious weeds are a problem is because they have pretty flowers. So when we come in and we bring in all these noxious weeds that have pretty these plants that have all these pretty flowers and these beautiful like growing habits, and we love them, and then they take over ecosystems and become noxious weeds, that's when Arizona Department of Agriculture gets involved. And then if we decide to transfer across state lines, then we get USDA APHIS involved, and they're in charge of maintaining that. So we've got some definitions there and some that are listed on what we have right now for noxious weeds. So wrapping up here, but just so you know, like, so when you're out wild collecting, one of the things is you might not have self-service, you might not have stuff. So these are recommendations I do use in my work, because I do work out down in the Blue, down in Eagle Creek, down in a lot of places that don't have self-service. So we use Garmin InReach satellite safety communication. It's just a Garmin that you can send text from that is satellite based, and like we can follow each other on the actual like website that shows where we are. It takes like a point every 5 minutes, which is good and bad, you know, depending on who you are and what your intent is. We also use Avenza. We take a lot of points with Avenza. And it's a cool smart for smartphones, and it has a hard time translating between programs as far as like if you want to download data, it's really sketchy. But if I just want to indicate where I am at for a form or whatever, Avenza's been amazing, and you don't need cell service. So, you know, it runs off of your phone and still can pick up satellites. iNaturalist, I love iNaturalist. I'm still working with it though, so I did not use it for a lot of my research yet. And then picture this, everyone has their favorite app. The one thing with apps is that it will get you to most of the time it gets you to the correct family, but do not count on it to be the actual plant that it is. So take your picture of this, or, you know, whichever one your favorite thing is, and then go back to your books and cross-reference to see what the actual species is. Because I get a lot of people that will quote, oh, I picture this, it's this. And it's like, well, that doesn't occur here. So just take your picture, identify it, and then break it down to actually what occurs. And thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And we did have a question, and it's actually thought I had too. So you shared a lot of great links and resources in your presentation. If possible, perhaps you won't be able to do all of them, but at least the ones that you think are most useful, if in the chat box, maybe as a separate message, if you can provide some links to the various resources and websites that you mentioned, that would be helpful, because you did have a lot of great information there.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you.